Before there were cards, before ink-kissed parchment, there was a language older than words, a silent lexicon of symbols whispered from the stars to the first dreamers. It did not belong to any one people. It moved like a current beneath civilizations, rising and falling as empires turned to dust. This was the secret seed from which the tarot would one day grow, not as a mere game of fortune, but as a map of the soul. Encrypted in imagery that could outlast kingdoms, our journey begins in the shadowed memory of humanity, where the line between myth and history dissolves. The earliest fragments lead us to the temple libraries of forgotten cities, where the priest astronomers charted the heavens and inscribed their visions upon clay, stone, and gold. These were not idle sketches. Each figure was a cipher, each image a vessel for the resonance of the cosmos. To the initiated, they spoke of the laws that Hermetic philosophers would later distill into the axiom, as above, so below. It is said that in the sacred halls of ancient Egypt, not the Egypt of pharaohs etched in school books, but the hidden Egypt, the one remembered in priestly initiations and whispered in the house of life, there existed a deck of tablets. These were not cards in the modern sense, but painted slabs of lapis, obsidian, and ivory, each depicting an archetype of the soul's journey. They were arranged upon the temple floor in great ceremonial workings, where initiates would step from one to another as the high priest spoke the cosmic myth that threaded them together. Those who completed the passage were said to emerge changed, their mind aligned with the secret geometry of the universe. Legends from Hellenistic Alexandria claim that these images survived the fires that devoured the library. Smuggled by initiates into the catacombs beneath the city, they passed through the hands of mystics, astrologers, and philosophers of many tongues. Each custodian added, altered, or translated the images, embedding new layers of symbolism like rings in the trunk of an ancient tree. Over centuries, these archetypes began to move westward, merging with the wisdom of Kabbalists, Sufi mystics, and itinerant scholars who read the stars by night and strange manuscripts by candlelight. By the time the tarot appeared in Europe, its imagery was already ancient, a palimpsest of civilizations, their myths condensed into a symbolic system that could be read like a cosmic script. The kings and fools, the towers and stars were not invented for the card table. They were the scattered remnants of a vision humanity had carried since its earliest dawn. And yet, to understand why the tarot took the shape it did, we must journey deeper, beyond the markets and printing presses of the Middle Ages, into the hidden crossroads where sacred geometry, alchemical philosophy, and the visions of wandering magi fused into the deck we recognize today. The Middle Ages are remembered as an age of stone fortresses and candlelit chapels, yet beneath the surface moved a secret current, one that wound through monasteries, guild halls, and the quiet chambers of alchemists who saw the world as an unfinished manuscript of God. It was in this twilight realm, where the church guarded knowledge with locked chains and heresy was a sentence of fire, that the ancient imagery of the tarot began to take root in European soil. The images did not arrive as a complete deck, but as fragments, illuminated manuscript pages from Spain bearing strange symbolic courts, painted panels in northern Italy depicting triumphal processions with allegorical figures, coded miniatures in the margins of devotional books that hinted at far older mysteries. The wandering Romani, themselves heirs to ancient Indian and Persian traditions, carried with them a lore of divinatory patterns, mingling it with the archetypes they encountered along their routes. Merchants returning from the Levant brought talismanic images copied from Arabic texts, where astrology and magic intertwined in ways forbidden in Christendom. In the courts of Renaissance Italy, where scholars gathered under the banners of powerful patrons, these disparate symbols found fertile ground. The great families, the Visconti, the Sforza, commissioned lavish painted cards for private amusement, but in the eyes of the initiated, these were more than games. They were diagrams of the soul's ascent, veiled as art, the trump sequence, from the fool to the world. Mirrored the path of spiritual initiation, the soul's journey, from ignorance to divine union. The careful arrangement of these images concealed layers of meaning drawn from Hermetic philosophy, Neoplatonic thought, and Kabbalistic mysticism. Florence, under the shadow of the Medici, became a crucible for such synthesis. In hidden chambers, Marsilio Ficino translated the Corpus Hermeticum, while Pico della Mirandola proclaimed that truth was to be found in the unity of all traditions. To these thinkers, the Tarot's imagery was a living text, a book without words, in which the principles of alchemy, the correspondences of astrology, and the architecture of the tree of life could be read by those who possessed the key. But to ensure survival, the deeper meaning was disguised. In a Europe where the Inquisition's reach was long and merciless, open transmission of such knowledge was dangerous, so the tarot became a mask, its sacred geometry and cosmic allegories hidden beneath the guise of painted pastime. The initiate might see the high priestess and recall Isis veiled in the temple of Sais. The uninitiated would see only a robed woman with a book. Thus, the tarot passed from court to court, city to city, guarded by artists, philosophers, and mystics who understood its dual nature. By the time Gutenberg's press spread printed decks across the continent, the seed had been sown. Yet the full flowering of the tarot's occult identity still lay ahead, in the age of secret societies, when the cards would be drawn into the great web of esoteric orders that sought to restore the lost wisdom of the ancients. The 17th and 18th centuries unfolded like a shifting labyrinth, an age where reason rose like a bright sun, yet shadows lengthened behind it. The tarot, once a guarded relic of courts and artists, now wandered freely through Europe, carried in the pockets of fortune-tellers in Parisian cafes, spread upon velvet in candlelit attics, whispered about in backrooms thick with incense and secrecy, but in the hidden strata of society. Another transformation was taking place. It was the time of the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, and other veiled brotherhoods, societies whose very existence was an act of rebellion against the amnesia imposed by political and religious power. These groups saw themselves as custodians of a sacred inheritance stretching back to Egypt, Chaldea, and Atlantis. In their temples, beneath painted ceilings of stars, initiates passed through rituals that echoed the old mystery schools, learning that symbols could speak across centuries when words were forbidden. Into this atmosphere, the tarot was drawn like a lodestone to its twin. Secret orders began to weave its images into their rites, aligning each card with the pillars of the Kabbalistic tree of life, the signs of the zodiac, and the steps of the alchemical magnum opus. To them, the tarot was not simply a sequence of pictures, it was a portable temple, a diagram of the cosmos folded into 78 symbolic windows. The fool became the initiate, the magician the awakened will, the tower the shattering of illusion, the world the final union with the all. Paris in the 1780s became the crucible of this occult revival. Here, Antoine Court de Gibelin, a Protestant scholar, Freemason, and polymath, proclaimed in his multi-volume Le Monde Primitif that the tarot was a fragment of the lost Book of Thoth, the legendary compendium of Egyptian wisdom said to hold the secrets of creation itself. Though his historical claims were speculative, they ignited a fire in the minds of mystics and esotericists across Europe. Soon, the tarot was no longer merely a fortune-teller's tool. It was reborn as a sacred key to the universal mysteries. From that point onward, the tarot's imagery became charged with deliberate correspondences. Each card was carefully mapped to planets, elements, Hebrew letters, and occult formulas. The deck was no longer just an inheritance from the past. It had become a living laboratory for those seeking to decode the architecture of reality itself. And as these teachings spread through the lodges, a deeper undercurrent emerged, the belief that the tarot was not a European invention at all. but a surviving shard of a much older, perhaps pre-cataclysmic, civilization? Yet to reach the roots of that civilization, one must pass beyond the pages of Enlightenment treatises and into the veiled histories, the whispers of priest-kings, stargazers, and builders whose monuments still watch us from the deserts and seas. Betrayal, now, leads back once more into the mists before history, before the first stone of Egypt was laid, before the fires of summer flickered against temple walls. There are whispers of a civilization whose memory is not written in books, but in the bones of the earth itself. The custodians of this myth speak of an age before the last great flood, a time when human beings walked beneath skies mapped by constellations no longer visible, when the science of spirit and the science of matter were one. It is within this lost dawn that some believe the true seed of the tarot was planted. Legends from the Hermetic stream tell of Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom, Jehuti, the divine scribe, who inscribed the laws of creation upon 42 sacred scrolls. Yet some claim these scrolls were not mere writings, but a living codex of images, cosmic diagrams, archetypal forms, and symbolic tableaux designed to awaken the latent faculties of the initiate. These were not for the common gaze. They were kept in sanctuaries accessible only to those who had passed through the initiatory trials, the symbolic death and rebirth that aligned the seeker with Mat, the cosmic order. Similar traditions echo in distant lands. In India, the mandalas of the early Vedic seers served as geometric mirrors of the universe. In Mesoamerica, the codices of the Olmecs and Mayans, with their layered symbolism of gods, cycles, and celestial patterns, bear uncanny structural resemblance to the logic of the tarot. Across these cultures, the principle was the same. Sacred images could operate as vessels of knowledge too vast to confine to all. RDS, a portable microcosm of reality. If the tarot indeed traces back to such a source, it may have journeyed through the ages like a wandering exile, hiding within the symbolic systems of each civilization it touched. Atlantis, whether a literal land or a cipher for a forgotten golden age, is often invoked in these tales. The legend holds that when its end came, the adepts of that age carried their wisdom into the world's safe places, the temples of Egypt, the hidden valleys of Tibet, the stone circles of the South. And always, somewhere in some guarded form, the sequence of images endured, adaptable, yet unchanging in its core. By the time history's recorded civilizations emerged, these primordial images had already been scattered into many tongues: the astrological glyphs of Mesopotamia, the sacred hieroglyphs of Egypt, the mystical alphabets of the Hebrews, the labyrinthine patterns of Greek mystery art. In the tarot, these fragments would one day converge again, like the return of a long-dispersed family of symbols to a single home. Yet to see how they converged, we must follow the path through the labyrinth of medieval and Renaissance transmission into the decisive moment when secret societies wove them into a unified, mystical architecture, transforming the tarot into the book of life for a new era of seekers. The 19th century dawned with an air of contradiction, an age intoxicated by industrial progress, yet haunted by a hunger for the mysteries it had long tried to suppress. In the smoke of factories and the hum of new machines, there rose a countercurrent, an occult revival that reached back into the symbols of antiquity, seeking the keys to a deeper order of existence. The tarot, still shuffling between the hands of fortune-tellers in Paris and street magicians in Marseille, was about to be drawn into the most ambitious esoteric reconstruction the West had ever seen. Eliphas Levi, a defrocked priest turned occult scholar, stepped onto this stage like a herald of the forgotten. In his writings, he proclaimed the tarot to be nothing less than the pictorial embodiment of the Kabbalah. 78 windows into the structure of creation, each linked to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, the 10 Sephiroth, and the pathways between them. To Levi, the tarot was not a curiosity, but the universal key, a tool for prophecy, meditation, and the unlocking of the invisible laws that bind the cosmos. His influence rippled outward, inspiring a new generation of magicians, mystics, and secret orders. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in London in the 1880s, absorbed the tarot into the very heart of its initiatory system. For its adepts, the deck became a ritual instrument, aligned meticulously with astrological attributions, elemental forces, and the precise geometries of the Tree of Life. To advance in the order, one did not merely read the tarot, one entered it, walking the path from card to card, as one would walk the inner corridors of the soul. It was here that the tarot began to take the form most of the modern world recognizes. Artists like Pamela Coleman Smith, under the guidance of mystic scholars such as A. Waite, gave visual flesh to the Golden Dawn's symbolic correspondences, producing a deck where every detail, from the angle of a figure's hand to the number of flowers in a field, was a cipher. This was not ornamentation, it was encryption. The cards became portable altars, their illustrations holding layer upon layer of magical, astrological, and alchemical significance. Meanwhile, on the continent, French occultists such as Papus and Oswald Wirth crafted their own esoteric decks, blending Levi's teachings with Rosicrucian imagery, Masonic symbolism, and the vision of the tarot as a mirror of universal truth. Each variation was not merely an artistic choice, but a declaration of how the great puzzle of reality might be mapped. By the century's close, the tarot was no longer a half-forgotten relic of Renaissance courts. It had become an integrated tool of the Western mystery tradition, a sacred technology for navigating the world seen and unseen. Yet even then, a question remained, one that would lure 20th century seekers into deeper waters. Was the tarot's origin truly in Egypt, in Atlantis, in lost temples? Or was it something stranger still? A bridge between human consciousness and the archetypal realm beyond time. The 20th century brought both revelation and distortion. As the tarot spread beyond the sanctuaries of the initiates into the hands of the public, it entered a new kind of labyrinth, one woven not of stone and ritual, but of mass culture, psychology, and the quiet persistence of the occult underground. In the early decades, the work of the Golden Dawn's heirs, Waite, Crowley, and others, still bore the unmistakable stamp of initiatory design. Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed great beast, took the tarot and reforged it into the Thoth deck, a sprawling synthesis of astrology, Kabbalah, alchemy, and his own Thelemic philosophy. To Crowley, the cards were not simply for divination. They were formulae for transformation, doorways to states of consciousness where the magician could converse with the forces that shape existence itself. The Thoth deck, painted by Lady Freda Harris, carried a density of symbolism so deliberate that each card could occupy a lifetime of study. Yet even as this occult lineage deepened, a parallel movement emerged. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, fascinated by myth and symbol, recognized in the tarot the living forms of what he called the archetypes, primordial images that dwell in the collective unconscious of humanity. The Fool, the Magician, the Empress, the Tower, these were not just emblems for magicians, but mirrors of the inner psychic landscape. Through Jung's lens, the tarot became a bridge between the esoteric and the psychological, between ancient ritual and the modern quest for self-knowledge. The mid-century brought war, upheaval, and the rise of a more skeptical, materialist worldview. Yet the tarot endured, traveling quietly through the countercultures of the 1960s, the New Age of the 1970s, and the alternative spiritual movements of the late century. In these circles, the cards often returned to their oracular role, but always with the echo of their deeper currents intact. Some still studied them as keys to the mysteries. Others saw them as tools for personal reflection, creativity, and meditation. Throughout it all, the question of origins persisted. Scholars and mystics alike sifted through historical traces, finding no definitive proof for the Egyptian theory of court de Gibelin, yet also unable to dismiss the striking correspondences between the tarot and the sacred imagery of the world's ancient traditions. It was as if the deck itself refused to be pinned down, a living puzzle, revealing just enough to keep the seeker on the path, but never so much that the journey could end. And so, by the turn of the millennium, the tarot had become something paradoxical, both the most public of mystical tools and still, in its deeper dimensions, a guarded mystery. Its roots reached into a past too distant to name, and its branches stretched toward a future where humanity might once again remember the language of symbols in its fullness. But to understand that fullness, we must now leave the straight road of history and step into the spiral, into the hidden philosophy that the tarot carries in its structure, a philosophy that reflects the very laws by which the universe unfolds. The tarot is more than 78 images bound in card form. It is a model in motion, a cosmic diagram disguised as a sequence, a wheel that can be entered at any point yet always leads to the same center, to the Hermetic initiate. Its structure is no accident. It is an encoded expression of the same laws that govern the stars, the cycles of the seasons, and the hidden architecture of the soul. The major arcana, 22 in number, mirror the 22 paths of the tree of life in the Kabbalah, the luminous network connecting the 10 Sephiroth, or emanations, through which divine energy flows into creation. Each path is a stage of transformation, a threshold to be crossed, from the full, representing infinite potential before manifestation, to the world, signifying the union of spirit and matter. The arcana trace the archetypal pilgrimage of consciousness itself. The minor arcana, with their forsooths, echo the 4 elements of Hermetic and alchemical tradition: fire wands, water cups, air swords, and earth pentacles. These are the primal forces of nature and psyche, and within each chute runs a progression, a miniature cycle of growth, conflict, mastery, and completion. When arranged with awareness, the entire deck becomes a living map of the interplay between the universal and the personal, the eternal and the transient. The tarot's sequence is also woven into celestial patterns. Certain adepts align each major arcana card with an astrological force, planets, zodiac signs, and elemental energies. Others discern a resonance with the stages of the alchemical magnum opus, the blackening, whitening, yellowing, and reddening that symbolize the transformation of the soul as much as a base matter into gold. The Hermetic principle, as above, so below, is not merely written into the tarot's philosophy. It is embedded into its very order, as if the cards themselves were fragments of the same divine geometry that shapes the constellations. In this way, the tarot is both book and temple, teacher and mirror. Its images do not explain, they reveal. The Fool's step is your first step. The Tower's fall is your own breaking of falsehood. The star's light is the vision you carry through darkness. Those who walk its path discover that the tarot is less about predicting a fixed fate and more about unlocking the hidden conversation between the self and the cosmos. Yet even this understanding, profound as it may be, is not the end of the journey, for the tarot's final secret lies not in its history or its structure, but in its living use, in the way it acts as a threshold between the world of form and the invisible currents that shape destiny. And to glimpse that, we must step into the silence at the heart of the deck, where the archetypes themselves speak. In the quiet between shuffling and the turning of the first card, there is a moment when time bends. The seeker sits before the spread, the air heavy with the unspoken, and the images rise, not as mirroring and pigment, but as presences. They are older than the paper, older than the hands that hold them, older even than the languages we speak. Each is an emissary from the realm where form is born, where meaning is shaped before it enters the world. Here, the tarot becomes what it has always truly been, a threshold, The cards are not passive objects to be read, but living archetypes that read you in return. When the magician appears, he is not simply a symbol of will and creation. He is the reminder that the tools are already upon your table. When death enters, it is not a prophecy of ruin, but the touch of the great transformer, clearing the ground. For renewal, the cards speak in layered tongues, one for the conscious mind, another for the dreaming soul, and a third for that silent witness within you that has known these patterns since before your birth. It is in this act of reading, whether done for prophecy, meditation, or ritual, that the tarot fulfills its oldest purpose. In ancient temples, initiates would walk among painted or carved symbols, allowing the images to impress their truths upon the heart. The tarot carries that temple into the present moment. The table becomes the sacred floor, the spread the pattern of the cosmos, the reader and querent the priest and pilgrim alike. Those who work deeply with the deck often report that its answers grow stranger over time, less like clear predictions and more like mirrors that reveal what was hidden, or doorways into insights that arrive later, when the moment is right. This is because the tarot is not a mechanical oracle. It is an instrument tuned to the inner harmonics of the one who seeks. The more it is used with reverence, the more it reveals the subtle weaving of the outer world and the inner self. And so, the real origin of the tarot may not be a point in history at all. It may be an eternal current, surfacing again and again wherever humanity dares to remember the language of symbols. Whether it was born in Egypt, in Atlantis, in the temples of forgotten continents, or in the collective dream of humankind itself, its essence remains unchanged: a book without words, a map without territory, a mirror without reflection. You do not merely learn the tarot, you step into it, and once you do, you are walking a path that began before history and will continue long after the last of our written books has turned to dust. The same path the ancients walked beneath other suns, under other skies, in other ages when the language of the soul was known by all. For the tarot, like the truth it hides, has no beginning and no end.